Welcome to the world of Sci-Fi Stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. A war so brutal. The galaxy now trembles at humanity's name in fear. The galaxy had never seen a war like this. For centuries, the great empires of the stars had fought among themselves, trading planets like currency, waging wars with rules, with codes, with restraint. Then they made the mistake of attacking Earth. No one had ever considered humanity a real threat. Earth was a backwater world, primitive by galactic standards, the Dominion a sprawling empire of cold-blooded zealotry overlords saw Earth as nothing more than an easy conquest, a test perhaps for their young warriors. They descended upon the blue planet with their gleaming warships, expecting surrender. Instead they found hell. The first days of the war were chaos. Humanity, fractured and unprepared, suffered immeasurable losses. Cities were burned from orbit. Entire populations were wiped out in the blink of an eye. The Zeri laughed at the feeble resistance, their warriors marching through the ruins of human civilization, believing victory was all but assured. Then humanity changed. Survival wasn't enough. Surrender was never an option. The war became something else, something monstrous. Humanity refused to die quietly. They'd fought with weapons the galaxy had never seen. They'd waged war without honor, without restraint. The Dominion had come expecting a civilized battle, but what they got was annihilation. Earth's soldiers turned to guerrilla warfare, using every trick, every trap, every ounce of desperation to claw back their world. And when they finally learned to fight in space, when they adapted, when they evolved, there was no stopping them. The first true victory came when the resistance captured the Zeri warship. No one knew how the Ragdig survivors did it, only that they had stormed the craft like demons from hell, slaughtering the alien crew with their bare hands when their weapons failed. And then they took the war to the stars. The galaxy watched in horror as the tides turned. Human warships, fast and relentless, struck deep into Dominion territory, planets that had never known war burned as humanity avenged its fallen. The Zeri, once proud conquerors, now fled in terror at the sight of Earth's war banners. But it wasn't just war, it was something worse. It was personal. Humanity did not just conquer, they destroyed. They wiped out entire species that had allied with the Dominion. They burned entire civilizations to the ground. The peaceful races of the galaxy begged for mercy, pleaded for humanity to stop, but Earth had no mercy left. And so the war continued. The galaxy trembled, and humanity, once the underdog, now stood as the monsters in the dark. This was no longer a fight for survival. This was vengeance, and it had only just begun. The Dominion's desperate retreat shattered the illusion of their invincibility. Before the war with humanity, they were the most feared empire in the galaxy, their war banners stretching across thousands of conquered worlds. Now their fleets burned in space, their generals slain, their planets falling one by one. But the horror wasn't just in humanity's victories, it was in how they fought. The Dominion had always waged war with a sense of superiority. Having enslaved, they conquered, but they never truly obliterated. Their wars were meant to end with surrender, with a new ruler taking the throne of a beaten world. Humanity had no such intentions. The first recorded footage of the war turning against the Dominion came from the fall of Vorsk 9, a planet that had served as a military outpost for centuries. Dominion soldiers, once elite and ruthless, were now the ones cowering. When human warships entered the system, there was no declaration, no warning. The sky simply erupted into fire. The humans did not land troops, they did not take prisoners, they bombed the world until the surface boiled, until the oceans turned to steam, until not a single Zeri remained. Then they moved on. Planet after planet suffered the same fate. Dominion soldiers abandoned their posts, throwing down their weapons in surrender, hoping for the mercy that humanity once valued. But mercy had died. On Earth, the few survivors who escaped reported the nightmares that followed. Human ground troops weren't soldiers. They were executioners. They didn't fight for glory or honor. They fought to exterminate Zeri colonies, even those that had never participated in the war. where torn-apart cities were leveled. Civilians butchered the Usar that managed to flee the bloodbath told. Stories of human soldiers wearing the bones of their fallen enemies, of laughter echoing through the ruins of their worlds. The galaxy's other empires watched in horror for centuries. They had believed humanity was weak. Now they realized their mistake. The Dominion's Grand Council, once so proud, was now a chamber of fear and desperation. Their leader, Supreme Chancellor Vor, stood before his advisors, his reptilian features sunken and pale. "They will not stop," one of his ministers whispered. "We must surrender. We must offer them our empire." Chancellor Vor shook his head. "You think they want our surrender?" His voice cracked. "They do not want peace. They do not want rule." He turned to the holographic projection of what once been the Dominion capital world, now a wasteland of fire and bones. "They want us dead." And so the Dominion prepared for its final stand. They sent distress signals across the galaxy begging for help. Some empires considered intervening, but fear held them back. If the Dominion, the most powerful empire in the galaxy, had fallen to humanity, what chance did they have? One by one, they stayed silent. Humanity's name spread through the stars, no longer as an afterthought, but as a warning. The species that had once dreamed of exploring the galaxy had become its greatest nightmare, and the war was far from over. The Dominion's last strongholds trembled as humanity's fleet pushed further into their space. There was no slowing down, no hesitation. Every world that had once belonged to the Zeri was either burning or already turned to dust. The other galactic empires remained frozen in fear, watching from the shadows. They whispered among themselves, debating whether they should intervene, but none dared move. They had seen what happened to those who stood in humanity's way. The Dominion had been arrogant, powerful beyond measure, and yet their fleets now floated as debris in the void. The final battle loomed over Zelor Prime, the heart of the Dominion. The once mighty homeworld of the Zari was no longer a symbol of power. It was a world drowning in fear. Its once proud cities were filled with refugees, the remnants of a species on the brink of extinction. The skies above Zelor Prime were a desperate mess of defense platforms, last-ditch barricades, and warships pulled from the farthest reaches of the Dominion. But deep down, they all knew the truth. Nothing would stop what was coming. The human fleet arrived in silence. No grand declarations, no demands for surrender. The galaxy had learned by now humanity did not waste time with words. They simply killed. Zeri warships, once the terror of the stars, broke apart within moments of contact. They fired everything they had: plasma lances, dark matter, torpedo, planet killer warheads. But the humans had adapted. They learned from every battle, evolved with every loss. What had once been primitive ships of steel and fire were now fast, precise instruments of death. Within hours, the Zeri fleet was nothing more than wreckage. And then came the ground assault. Zelor Prime's surface became a slaughterhouse. Zeri warriors fought with desperation, knowing there was nowhere left to run. They fought harder than ever before, but humanity was something else entirely. They moved like demons in the night, armored soldiers carrying through lines of defense like an unstoppable plague. For every human that fell, 10 Zeri died. Civilians ran, mothers clutching their children, elders whispering prayers to gods that had abandoned them. They had thought surrender might still be an option, that perhaps if they bowed low enough, humanity would show mercy. But mercy had not survived Earth's fall. The final hours of Zelor Prime were not a battle. They were an execution. The human forces spread through the cities like fire, leaving nothing untouched. The Zeri royal palace, a symbol of dominance for thousands of years, crumbled in flames. And then it was over. The last Zeri signal faded into the void. The Dominion was no more. The silence that followed was not relief, it was terror. The galaxy now understood humanity had not won the war. They had become the war. The once fractured human race, once divided by borders and nations, now had a single purpose. The rage that had fueled them through the Dominion slaughter of Earth had not faded. It burned hotter than ever. And now, with no enemy left to fight, the question became who was next. The other empires began sending frantic messages desperate to reach the humans before they made their decision. But deep down, they all knew the truth humanity had tasted: vengeance, and they were not done. The silence that followed the fall of the Dominion was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. It wasn't peace, it wasn't relief, it was the quiet of something unnatural, something worse than war. Zeller Prime had been humanity's final message to the stars, a brutal testament to what happened to those who dared cross them. The planet had not just been conquered, it had been erased. The ruins of its once great cities smoldered under the dim light of its dying sun, and the corpses of the last salary lay scattered across the wasteland. There were no survivors, no prisoners, no negotiations. Humanity had made one thing clear: they were done being victims now. They were the ones to be feared across the galaxy. Empires trembled at the thought of what would come next. The galactic community, once arrogant and dismissive of Earth, was now paralyzed with terror. The most powerful rulers, the most ancient civilizations held secret meetings, whispering in panicked voices. Would humanity stop, or would they turn their sights on the rest of the galaxy, desperate to prevent their own destruction? The most powerful empires sent envoys to humanity's new high command, pleas for peace, offers of alliances, promises of reparations, anything to avoid the fate of the Dominion. The response from humanity came days later: a single transmission, 3 words: "We are watching." It was not a declaration of peace, it was a warning. The galaxy scrambled to interpret the message. Did it mean humanity was satisfied with their vengeance? Would they stand down now that their greatest enemy was gone? Or was this just the beginning? No one knew, and that uncertainty was the most terrifying thing of all. Fall as the galaxy held its breath, reports began to emerge of something even worse. Human warships had been sighted far beyond Dominion space, deep in uncharted territories. They moved without transmitting signals, without declaring their purpose. They were ghosts in the void, appearing at the edges of different empires' borders before vanishing just as quickly. At first, the sightings were dismissed as paranoia. But then ships started going missing. At first, it was only small scout vessels, then entire convoys vanished without a trace. Military outposts along the farthest reaches of the galactic core went silent. No distress signals, no debris fields, just gone. And then the messages began. Distorted transmissions filled the emergency channels of every major empire, their signals twisted and broken by unknown interference. But through the static, one thing was clear: a voice, cold, mechanical, inhuman. "You watched as they burned our world. Now we are watching you." The message was always the same, repeating endlessly until the transmissions cut off into empty silence. No one knew what it meant. No one wanted to find out. Entire empires began and fortifying their worlds, preparing for a war that hadn't been declared. The most ancient civilizations, the ones that had stood unchallenged for thousands of years, now cowered behind their planetary shields, hoping that if they stayed quiet, humanity's gaze would pass over them. Trade routes changed overnight. Merchants refused to pass near human-occupied space. Pilots whispered of derelict warships floating in the void, their hulls carved with symbols in the old human tongue, reminders of Earth's suffering. Some believed humanity was testing them, waiting for the first empire to make a mistake. Others feared humanity no longer cared about strategy, that this wasn't about war anymore, that this was about revenge. The great rulers of the stars, the ones who had once dismissed Earth as nothing but a primitive world, could do nothing but sit in their gilded palaces, staring at the endless black of space, and wonder, was humanity still watching? Or had they already begun their hunt? The fear that gripped the galaxy had no name, no precedent. The Dominion had been wiped from existence, its people erased, its homeworld reduced to a charred wasteland. But the war had left behind something far worse than destruction. It had left behind silence. The humans were out there watching, waiting. No one knew where they would strike next. Some empires fell into chaos, their leaders descending into paranoia, fortifying their worlds in desperate hope. Others tried to send envoy emissaries bearing gifts, treaties, and unconditional surrender pleas for mercy. Before a war had even begun, humanity did not answer. Days Past then weeks, then months, the galaxy became a graveyard of anticipation. Trade routes were abandoned. Fleets no longer patrolled their borders, but hid within them the great empires of the stars, races that had conquered whole sectors, that had ruled without challenge. For millennia no longer spoke in terms of power, now they whispered only in fear, and then the disappearances began. Entire warships began vanishing from the void. At first it was small vessels, scouts, supply freighter outposts, and the farthest reaches of known space. There was no distress signal, no warning, just silence, the kind of silence the humans had left behind on Zelor Prime. Then the larger ships began to vanish, battleships, carriers, flagships of powerful armadas, entire fleets disappearing without a trace. It was never in the heart of any empire, never an outright attack. Number humanity was patient. They were hunting. The first message came from the Taiyan Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their fleet, a force that had once brought entire star systems to their knees, had been reduced to scattered fragments of debris. A lone escape pod drifted into the Tauran homeworld's orbit, its occupant barely clinging to life. The transmission they recovered was garbled, broken, filled with static, but the voice, oh, the voice they understood perfectly. You sat and watched as they burned us. Now we will watch as you fall. Panic spread like wildfire. The Tauran government collapsed within days. Their colonies, once loyal and strong, revolted before humanity even reached them. They rendered to the ghosts in the void before the first human worship even appeared. And then, just like that, the humans were gone. No invasion, no occupation, just silence. It was the beginning of a new era, one that no one had foreseen. Races that had stood at the peak of the galactic order began to flee their own homes. Worlds that had been inhabited for thousands of years were abandoned. Overnight, entire civilizations packed their people into colony ships and sent them into the unknown, hoping to escape the gaze of Earth's wrath. But there was no escaping. The humans were everywhere, not in grand fleets, not in armadas that blotted out the stars. No, they moved like whispers in the dark, their ships appearing only long enough to remind the galaxy of their presence. They left no demands, no rules to follow, no ultimatums to obey, only fear. And fear was enough. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy was at peace. Not by diplomacy, not by treaties, by terror. Where once there had been border conflicts, there was now retreat. Where once mighty warlords sought conquest, there was only hesitation. No one wanted to risk drawing humanity's attention. The stars had become quiet. No war, no conflict, because in the darkness, in the endless void of space, the name of humanity was whispered. With dread, they had been underestimated. They had been attacked. They had suffered. And now they were watching. And the galaxy would never know peace again.